And then really the last bit I want to cover is, Ed's question about how we scale this up, okay? And it's a very interesting point because, as I said before, there's these tried and tested protocols. It means that to do this, I will say loosely, properly and under certified conditions, we're having to put a lot of technology at the end of the building for not that much more gain, right? And the question we probably have to ask ourselves, if we're serious about hitting these targets, should we not take a different approach to it, put smaller technology across a bigger population of buildings, right, to achieve a better net effect, in effect. So what I've done here is just to use the UK, and you'll have to excuse me, I just pulled animal populations off the internet. I personally think the number of buildings in the UK is a lot more than this, but we'll just use this as a figure to be representative. We've got 29 million layer places, that's egg producing chickens. We've got about 119 million broiler, that's meat producing chicken places. And we've got about 4.7 million pigs. So if I break that down into what I would regard as a typical pig in the chicken house, that means we've probably got around 1,500 buildings on layers, around 4,000 buildings on broilers. And I know that figure is a lot more, but I can't get a fast number out. And today we have about 10,000 pig buildings in the UK, but 7,000 of those we will never do anything with because they're like, we jokingly say caravans, they're very low level buildings, but probably 3,000. So what I've done is I've added those all up and I've come to a figure of 8,500 for the sake of this point I want to make. The cost of putting this technology in is anything between 50 and 120,000 pounds a building. So it can be up to 20% of the cost of the building. And the running cost of it, of per building, is around £7,000 a year. So it's quite a significant cost. I say 50 to 100 because the 120 is probably if we put certified scrubbing in, and the 50 is if we put a smaller box dealing with 30% at a 70% reduction. The next question you have to ask yourself, well, how do we pay for it? Well, obviously the farmer can put his hand in his pocket and pay for it and eat into his already existing tight margins, which is the way the industry likes to play it if they can. We can look at subsidies, government funding to doing this. The government and society, want to feed the population locally, but they also need to think, well, how are we going to deal with the environmental consequences? I put 40% on that because at the moment I'm talking to politicians in Belgium where the subsidy in Belgium is 40% on this sort of technology. That's a given. When I talk about green labeling, that retailers stroke integrators, that's the people that they contract to produce meat, right? They could also put a levy on the price of chicken or pig and say, for example, with a chicken, I know for a fact some of them are already starting to put 2p on a kilo of chicken. So, some of the retailers are and their business partners are talking about, okay, we understand the farmers need to do these environmental systems. In the name of fairness, we should pay them something for doing it because they're good farmers and we want them under our contracts. And as I've already pointed out, another way that we could pay for it is, return on investment if we could use energy recovery systems. So again, the two approaches is, do we do the kind of certified licensing where we have a building replacement of 5% a year. So we will be clawing our way to below what is required by 2030, or do we do a kind of existing building upgrade, putting more technology on more buildings so we can meet that 16% target? And what does that look like? Well, if we say 2030, a 16% reduction over 8,500 buildings, and we put an acceptable level of abatement on there to reach this target, okay, let's say 30% of, then 8,500 buildings broken down over 10 years. I hope you can understand where I'm coming from this. At 30% means that we would have to meet those government guidelines, would need to upgrade 408 buildings a year based on 8,500 building population. What would be the cost of that? Wherever that's going to come from, the capital expenditure is about 20 million a year, and the operating expenditure would go from 3 million in the first year up to 30 million by the end of the decade. And again, I just reiterate and say, yes, obviously, this would have to be covered by something: subsidy, food labelling, energy recovery, or the farmer's pocket. Okay. And my final slide, just going back to return on investment, and this again is a typical chicken building in the UK, to give you an idea. 50,000 birds, they do run about 6.5 rounds a year. Chicken lives for about 42 days. So that means that that particular building is producing around 320,000 birds a year, you know, and they grow to about 2 kilograms. So about 4 pence a bird is what some of the companies are paying at the moment. That means the farmer would get around £13,000 a year under the guise of green labelling, right? So based on, you know, a 50,000 bird house having a scrubber more at the 60,000 euro range with a running cost of £7,000 a year, then you would expect a 10-year payback on the technology, including the running costs. Or if subsidy was leveled at it, then 6 years would be the payback. And that's it. So hopefully I answered Ed's questions, and I hope that I didn't run too fast and you got a feeling for what's possible, and certainly in terms of pigs and chickens. So over to you guys. Do we have any questions?